the live stream. Hello, everyone. This is John Clute, K7SYS, and I am your amateur radio moderator for today's ARIS, Amateur Radio on the International Space Station Contact. I'm speaking to you from my home in Sandpoint, Idaho. What makes this contact a little different from the usual ARIS contact is everyone involved in this contact will be speaking to you from different locations as we all work with COVID-19 restrictions. Through the help of the amateur radio volunteers and the crew on the ISS, we hope to soon establish an amateur radio contact with the International Space Station as it flies more than 200 miles above the Earth over Oregon. This contact will be performed using the Amateur Radio Telebridge Network, a worldwide network of amateur radio ground stations that enable students to contact the ISS. We're joined today by Jim Stith. Jim, please tell us a little bit about Newcastle High School and your hopes for this contact. Jim, take it away. Jim, are you there?
Yeah, sorry about that. Good morning, Commander Hopkins. My name is James Stith, Amateur Radio Operator, KI7URL, Science Teacher, and Mentor for the Newcastle High School Amateur Radio Club here in Newcastle, Wyoming. Newcastle High School is part of Weston County School District No. 1 in Northeast Wyoming. Our district serves approximately 800 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. These are some of my students at Newcastle High School. Trinity, Travis, James, Gunnar, Grayson, Toby, and Nate have been selected to participate in this ARIS contact due to their participation in my computer science class, their interest in amateur radio, and their interest in various STEM fields. My own adventure in amateur radio started many years ago by the constant encouragement of then-student Conrad Farnsworth, KF7QYA. As his persistence was the inspiration that led me to this hobby, so I hope that this contact will be the catalyst for future interest in both amateur radio and STEM. We are excited to be on the team to first make an ARIS contact from the great state of Wyoming. This contact has been supported by John Kramer, WY7VAF, and the Northeast Wyoming Amateur Radio Association, NE7WY. This contact is a culmination of almost 18 months of work between myself and various entities, especially John Clute, K7SYS. I understand that you have almost every minute of your day scheduled for you aboard the International Space Station, so it's even more meaningful that you give up your free time to bring this opportunity to our little corner of the world. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jim. That was a very interesting introduction, and I'm glad to hear that so many of the students and yourself are all themselves amateur radio operators. ARIS is an international program supported by amateur radio operators from around the world. Some member organizations of ARIS are the American Radio Relay League, the Worldwide AMSAT Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation affiliates, as well as space agencies including the Canadian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the Russian Space Agency. The amateur radio ground station that will establish contact with the ISS is NA7V, operated by Dave Nico Payne in Portland, Oregon. Nico, please tell us a little bit about your station and how you will handle today's contact with the ISS.
Good morning, this is station NA7V in Portland, Oregon. The radios and antennas here are computer controlled, and we'll be tracking the spacecraft using orbital software that controls both the antenna positions as well as the Doppler shift of the uplink and downlink frequencies. The spacecraft is currently just coming over Japan, and it'll be crossing the Pacific and then coming over Portland in a little bit. I will start calling the ISS just before the spacecraft reaches my horizon. It's going to be coming from the northwest and transitioning overhead, almost directly overhead, and then out to the southwest or southeast. When I begin calling the station, you'll hear some background radio noise, and this is normal. Since my ground station has a lot more power than the spacecraft, they will hear me before I hear their return call, and I'll make repeated calls until we make the contact. Back to you, John.
Very good. Thank you, Nico, and thanks for sharing with us about your station. We have about 12 minutes, a little more than 12 minutes till contact time. Our contact today is with astronaut Mike Hopkins, KF5LJG, who will be using the ISS call sign NA1SS. The American Radio League has provided us with a short video that tells us a little bit more about an ARIS contact and how it will happen. Let's watch that video.
Hi, my name is Ruth.
And my name is Chris.
You must be pretty excited to talk directly with astronauts on the International Space Station today. While we're waiting for the space station to come over your portion of the sky, let's talk a little bit about how it's going to happen. Of course, Mission Control is in contact with astronauts all the time, using a big radio with lots of fancy equipment.
However, we're going to be using something very different today. We are going to use ham or amateur radio to talk directly to the International Space Station.
When most people hear the word radio, they think of a music radio station, but it's so much more than that. Radio actually refers to the unseen energy that transmits all sorts of signals using electromagnetic waves. At first, people learned how to send signals like Morse code, and then they discovered that you can send so much more, like data, computer signals, and even TV.
Maybe you don't realize it, but you use radio every day. Maybe you watched the TV this morning, or you texted your friends, or maybe even you check social media like Twitter or Instagram.
Let's travel back to space for a minute. Since the beginning of the space age, humans have sent many spacecraft out into the universe. These range from the Hubble Space Telescope, orbiting the Earth daily, and the Curiosity rover exploring Mars. We've even sent a long-distance messenger, the Voyager 1, who has traveled outside of our solar system.
Whether it's capturing a great picture of a far-off galaxy or conducting experiments on the space station, radio has to do with all of these. And today, you're going to be using ham radio. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is ham radio?
Amateur or ham radio is a service and a hobby where operators can talk with people around their neighborhoods, their cities, their country, and even around the world. Amateur radio operators require a radio license from the government. They're not that hard to get. I have one. My call sign is KM4LAO.
And mine is KD8YVJ. Our call signs are a way of identifying who we are to other operators. This lets everyone know that we have the proper license to using the radios.
As amateur radio operators, or hams as we are often called, we can talk with others about basically whatever we want, often science or some new radio gadget that we are interested in.
Let's focus back to the space station and your contact today. Many of the astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the space station are licensed ham radio operators. That's why your operators today can contact them. The people here, as well as the astronauts, are licensed to talk to each other, and you are allowed to talk over to their radio.
For our conversation today, we'll need an amateur radio station on the ground, either in this location or somewhere else around the world. We'll also need a radio in the space station.
NA1SS, NA1SS.
You can hear the calls coming. This is November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra, the International Space Station, over.
On the space station, the radio transceiver is connected to an amateur radio antenna mounted on the outside. One of these antennas will be used today during our contact.
For our side of the contact, we need a good-sized antenna, a signal amplifier, something to make our signal stronger, and a rotator for turning our antenna. We have to keep our antenna pointed right at the International Space Station. And remember, it's moving across the sky and fast.
To aim the antenna properly, we need to track the path of the space station exactly. NASA uses complex systems to track the path of the space station and other orbiting objects.
The satellite tracking program we are using works out a complicated set of mathematics to provide the orbital location of the space station moment by moment as it moves through space. This information is sent into the computer that controls the antenna rotator, which moves the antenna to follow the space station. Maybe some of you have seen or worked with robotics. That's pretty cool stuff. And just like you can program a robot where to go, what to do, and how to get there, you can also program a computer to tell an antenna how to track the space station across the sky.
You know, it took a lot of planning to get this contact. Several weeks ago, the ARIS operations team had to figure out when the space station's orbit would pass over this location. Then, they had to talk with the planners at NASA's Johnson Space Center. The crew's time is pretty full, so they were able to find a time that could work for the crew members' schedules. Once they found times that would work both in space and here on the ground, the host organized this contact. And in just a few minutes, you'll be hearing and talking to the astronauts.
Well, it's almost time for your contact. It will be exciting, so good luck with it.
All right. Well, that's a very interesting video, and we're very appreciative of the American Radio Relay League for providing us with that video and their support. They've been a long-term supporter. We have about 9 minutes now until contact time, and we've seen what a contact looks like from the ground side. Astronaut Tim Peake, KG5 BVI, recorded a short video to show us what a contact looks like from the ISS side. Let's watch that video as well.
NA1SS, this is N2SJ, over.
NA2SJ from NA1SS for scheduled contact.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim Peake and welcome aboard the International Space Station, where we're orbiting Earth 16 times every day. One of the most rewarding activities that some astronauts undertake on orbit is to talk to schools using the space station's ham radio. Now these are events that are planned by ARIS, which is a worldwide group of amateur radio volunteers who are dedicated to introducing young people and students to science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Now this is the equipment here in the Columbus laboratory, which consists of a handheld radio, a headset, and we also have a ham video unit. Now as the International Space Station orbits above your location, a radio link is established between the ISS and your school. Now because we're travelling at nearly 18,000 miles per hour, which is an incredible 25 times the speed of sound, we usually get about 9 or 10 minutes of good radio contact before losing the signal. So about 5 minutes before the scheduled start time of the contact, I come into the Columbus laboratory and configure the radio so that I'm on the correct channel. And sometimes I'll set up the ham video too. Just before the predicted time, I'll begin to start calling the school using the standard amateur radio calling techniques. For example, if the call sign of your school was GB4 Fun, I would say Golf Bravo 4, Foxtrot Uniform November. This is Golf Bravo 1 Sierra Sierra, listening and standing by. Now at your school, the radio operator will be listening for my call, but may also transmit and try to call me as well. You'll probably have a much more powerful transmitter on the ground than we have up here on board, so I'm likely to hear you before you hear me. Then, once we can hear each other, then comes the best bit, which is actually talking to the students and answering the questions. Once I've answered all the questions, we use the remaining time to say goodbye to each other and end the connection. I'll then spend a few minutes configuring the radio back into a rebroadcast mode, and then I'll go back to my day job, which is of course doing science on board the International Space Station. ARIS is a brilliant opportunity for astronauts to talk to school pupils. It's really rewarding to hear how excited the students are when they're talking to somebody up here in space. And it's a true privilege to be able to inspire our next generation of scientists and engineers through amateur radio.
The ISS is presently approaching Alaska. We have about 6 minutes until the start of the contact. ARIS is truly an international effort. And for those of you who may watched the first attempt at the Newcastle contact, you're aware that with that contact, we had problems with the radio that we were using on the ISS. This rescheduled event is courtesy of the support and the cooperation with the Russian Space Agency and the cosmonauts on board, as we are using the 710DE, the 2-meter amateur radio that is located in the Russian segment of the ISS. So this truly is an international effort to bring these contacts to you. The ISS is traveling at about 18,000 miles per hour, 200 miles above the Earth. And at that speed, it takes about 10 minutes for the ISS to move from horizon to horizon. So the questions that we ask, and hopefully the 73 round where we say goodbye and thank you to the astronauts, all have to happen within that 10-minute time span. The ARIS program is presently celebrating its 20th anniversary, and we have made over 1,000 contacts, something like 1,300 contacts with the International Space Station, allowing astronauts and literally tens of thousands of students around the globe over the last 20 years to speak with the astronauts as they orbit above the Earth. The ISS is now centered almost exactly over the end of the Aleutian chain, heading towards Oregon, and our successful contact. As Jim Stith stated, this will be our first contact with Wyoming, which as a program, we're very happy that we were able to work with Jim to put this together. We have now contacted 49 of the 50 states here in the United States, with South Dakota being the only state has yet to have an ARIS contact, and we are working with South Dakota to achieve that so that we can, in fact, in amateur radio terms, have a clean sweep of all 50 U.S. states for an ARIS contact. You may have noticed that in Tim Peake's video, he alluded to a ham TV capability. Unfortunately, that capability is not functional at the present time. We had to remove it from the ISS and send it back to Earth, actually to Italy, to be repaired. It has now been repaired, and we are waiting for further testing to return it to the ISS, so that in addition to these audio contacts, hopefully we can actually see the astronaut as he speaks with the students on the ISS. So that is stay tuned, but that is a capability that we are working very hard to get returned to the ISS. We are now 3 minutes from contact time. The ISS is about 10 degrees below NICO's horizon in Portland, Oregon, and we are well over Alaska, heading into Canada as the ISS continues its journey towards our contact. So this is always a difficult part of the contact. We always wish we could make it go faster, but that just isn't the way it works. All we can do is wait for the ISS to appear over the horizon. 2 meters is a line of sight band within the amateur radio spectrum. Line of sight means that the transmitting station and the receiving station must be able to see each other. So we need to have the ISS appear over the horizon so that the two stations can see each other. And when they at LOS, which is the expression we use for loss of signal, when it drops over the opposite horizon, we will lose contact. On either end, as Nico noted, you may hear some radio hiss, some noise. That's just the standard background noise for an FM transmission. The 2 meter band, for those of you not familiar with the amateur radio band, is on 144 megahertz, which places it a little bit above the standard FM radio broadcast band that I'm sure many of you listen to. The ISS is now about 5 degrees below the horizon and continuing on its progress towards towards the Portland area. I now have the ISS 3 degrees below the horizon, and in just a little bit here, I will turn it over to Nico when the ISS is about 2 degrees below the horizon, so that he can begin making his calls. We always like to call early so that we get just as much of that pass as possible. 10 minutes doesn't seem like a very long time, but that's unfortunately because of orbital dynamics is all we have. So we want to make sure that we can make the most use of it. I have the ISS now a little less than 1 degree horizon. So Nico, over to you to begin making your call.
All right, thank you, John. November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra from November Alpha 7 Victor, scheduled school contact, over. November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra, November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra from November Alpha 7 Victor, scheduled school contact. November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra from November Alpha 7 Victor, scheduled contact. November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra from November Alpha 7 Victor, scheduled contact.
And November Alpha 7 Victor, this is November Alpha 1 Sierra Sierra. I hear you loud and clear, over.
Okay, we've got you loud and clear as well. Are you ready for questions?
The International Space Station is ready for questions, over.
Okay, go ahead, students.
This is Trinity. How long did it take you to fully adjust to being on the ISS? Over.
Hey Trinity, before I get going, I just want to say hi to all of the Newcastle High School students, everyone there. I grew up in a small town just like all of you, and so it's great to talk to you. How long did it take me to fully adjust to being on ISS? It's kind of funny. This is my second mission to ISS. My first one was 7 years ago, and the first one, it probably took me a couple of weeks, and this time, as soon as I crossed the hatch, it felt like I'd never left, over.
Travis?
This is Travis. What effects have you experienced from zero gravity? Over.
Hey Travis, yeah, quite a few effects up here. So I have had the impacts to my eyes. I also have had the bone loss. We have the fluid shift. I get a lot of fluid shift, and it causes to kind of have stuffiness and like you have allergies or something like that. So I get fluid in my ears. So there's definitely impacts from being up here in this microgravity environment, over.
This is James. What do you folks do for fun? Board games, play catch in space? Over.
Hey James, every day in space is fun because I'm floating, I'm getting to look down at the world, and so even work is fun up here. But you know, for our free time, we do a lot of the same things you do down on Earth. We do like to get together on a Friday night and have dinner together, and so we'll just sit around and talk. But then the other thing that we do is we'll spend a lot of time calling home and talking to our families and our friends, and then also just looking out the window. Playing catch up here, there's a lot of hardware and things like that, so once in a while we grab the football and throw it around, but you got to be awful careful too. You don't want to break anything. Over.
This is Gunner. What is the most interesting thing you have seen on a spacewalk? Over.
Gunner, that's a tough one. Spacewalks are amazing because when you get outside, of course, you get to see the world without anything in between you and it, except for the visor. And so you're your own little satellite. But I would say one of the more interesting things was just being in the total blackness of space. When you go around into the shadow and you don't see the sun, and it is dark, and sometimes it's even hard to see the station which you're holding on to just because it's so dark out there. Over.
This is Grayson. What happens when you fly into the South Atlantic anomaly? Over.
Hey Grayson, great question, and actually one of the things that oftentimes has an impact is our comm. So we use communication satellites that we relay through that allow us to have pretty much 24/7 communication with the ground. But sometimes when we're over the South Atlantic anomaly, that doesn't work as well. Over.
This is Toby. What is the most important lesson you've learned from your time in space? Over.
Toby, that's an interesting question, and I knew this lesson before I got up here, but it really helped emphasize it, and that is that it takes teams to do this kind of work. It's amazing that there's only 7 of us up here on board the International Space Station, but it takes thousands and thousands of people all across the world to make this space station operate. So teams are incredibly important. Over.
This is Nate. What types of organisms do you grow or use in space? Over.
Nate, there are all types of organisms that are up here. So we've got a lot of plants that are growing right now. We've got, let's see, what's some of the, we got pak choi and amare mustard are growing. I just was doing some experiments on some worms and seeing the effects on their muscles in microgravity. And hopefully when we learn about that, that'll help us learn about the effects on humans in microgravity as well, and even down on Earth. Over.
This is Trinity again. I'm asking a question for Mrs. Cummings' second grade class. How big is the International Space Station and what is inside? Are there bedrooms, gym, kitchen? Over.
Trinity, great question. The International Space Station is about the size of a 4 or 5 bedroom house. But we don't necessarily have bedrooms like you're used to. Our bedrooms are more like a little broom closet. Otherwise, we do have 2 toilets on board the International Space Station. We don't have a dedicated gym. We don't have a dedicated kitchen. Most of our modules, we do a lot of other things in there. So, for example, I'm down here right now in the Russian segment, and their treadmill is right next to their crew quarter, which is right next to their toilet, which is right next to their dining table. And so it's the same room, but it just has multi-functions. Over.
Travis here. Is it weird not being able to experience night and day the same as you would on Earth? Over.
It is a little weird when you see so many sunrises and sunsets, but in general it's not too bad because inside the station we don't have a lot of windows, and so you don't see all of those sunrises and sunsets that often because they keep us pretty busy. And so, we wake up in the morning, we turn on the lights, and when it's time to go to bed at night, we turn out the lights. And so that can feel kind of normal. Over.
James again. What research is currently being conducted? Is it biological? Over.
Yeah, James, we are doing a ton of science up here. Within one 6-month period, we'll do between 200 and 300 experiments. I already mentioned we're doing some on worms. We've had heart cells up here. We do a lot of fluid types experiments, and we are also experiments as well. And so, for example, my crewmate up here is doing an experiment with his diet and seeing if that helps prevent bone loss and the muscle loss and things of that nature. So there's just an unbelievable amount of science that's happening every day, 24/7 up here. Over.
This is Gunnar again. Have you ever lost something on a spacewalk? Over.
Gunnar, that is one of our biggest concerns when we are out on a spacewalk is losing something. So when you go outside the door, you have everything has a tether attached to it, including you. And so I can say, fortunately, I've never lost anything out on a spacewalk. However, on my last 2 spacewalks ago, we actually had to jettison something, so my crewmate got to take a cover off of an antenna and then throw that away, which is something unique we don't get to do very often. And then I'll also say that I have been lost, believe it or not, outside on the space station because without any up or down, and sometimes at night, it can get confusing as to where you are on the space station. Over.
Grayson again. Since spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome can affect mission success, does the research currently being conducted on the retina of mice take priority over other experiments? Over.
Grayson, I don't think it necessarily takes priority over it. Again, we have so many different experiments on here that are going on board the International Space Station at any one time that this is just one of many, and they all have a lot of priority. So, we're still able to continue to do our jobs, even though, as I mentioned, I've had these symptoms. And so we got to, We do have experiments that are constantly looking at that, but it doesn't necessarily take priority over others. Over.
This is Toby again. What is the weirdest solution to a problem that you've tried that actually worked? Over.
Hey, Toby, I was out on a spacewalk 7 years ago, and we were having trouble getting this connector connected, and there was a button that wouldn't go down. And so they came out and they just told me to hit it with something. And so that was a little strange to do out there because you don't want to break anything, but I got to hit it, and it actually worked. Over.
This is Nate. What is the most dangerous aspect about living and working in space? Over.
Hey, Nate, probably the biggest danger about living and working in space is, one, getting here, and two, coming home. So that rocket ride up and then the re-entry through the atmosphere are very dangerous times, and that's typically where most of the accidents have occurred. On the other hand, when we are up here, we are very concerned about emergencies like a depress scenario where we're venting atmosphere out into space, or a fire on board. That can also be very dangerous for us because we can't just run outside and call the fire department. Over.
Trinity here. What is the most exciting thing you have experienced so far? Over.
Trinity, that's a tough one to put as one thing as being the most exciting. I would say both of my launches and my one landing so far were extremely exciting. All four of my spacewalks were very exciting. And then I got to tell you, just living up here again, every day when I get to look out the window and see the Earth, it's just amazing, and it never gets old. And so I would say, though, those spacewalks and launches and landings are probably the most exciting thing. Over.
Okay, back to Jim for closing.
All right, thank you again, Commander Hopkins, for taking the time to speak with us for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. From all of us here in Newcastle, Wyoming, 73.
Okay, the space station has passed over the horizon.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating in a most successful of contacts. We've all just been part of a distance learning activity featuring students from Newcastle High School in Newcastle, Wyoming, speaking with Mike Hopkins, KF5 LJG on the International Space Station. On behalf of all ARIS International volunteer teams, sponsors, and space agencies, this is John Clute, Amateur Radio Operator K7 SYS, sending my greetings to all of you in traditional amateur radio terms. 7 3s, best wishes. You